Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. We're going to be talking more about from the page to the silver screen with three comic book characters. I have their first appearances here, which I'm going to show you. Like I mentioned in the other video, I'll be talking about characters like Superman and Lex Luthor. Those are the characters I don't have first appearances of, but I'll still talk about them because they're, um, some of the first superheroes to appear on the silver screen. Big screen, little screen, whatever. But more on that in another video. For this one, I'm going to be talking about three characters. And I'm going to start off with none other than the Crypt Keeper, who makes his first appearance here in Crime Patrol 15. Okay. For those of you that have watched the Tales from the Crypt HBO series, that was really probably the introduction of Tales from the Crypt for you. It was for me, and it was for many others. Despite that, though, obviously Tales from the Crypt and other horror comics that it shared, publishing, EC Comics put out, like Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear, they've been out since the 50s, but little did you know that there was another, maybe little did you know that there was another movie out. It was a movie in the 70s called Tales from the Crypt, released by Amicus in England. They put out Tales from the Crypt movie, which showcased 5 stories, and a year later they came out with the Vault of Horror, which showcased 5 stories, all from the comics. So Tales from the Crypt, with the Crypt Keeper, he first made his big screen debut in the Amicus film in 1972, and he was played by Ralph Richardson. Now that's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting for me at least, because Ralph Richardson was I think he was a Shakespearean actor and very big in the theater scene. And he's been in several films. You might remember him from, if you see the movie Time Bandits, he was, I think, the creator. You see him at the very end. He comes out, he's in the suit and all that stuff. He seemed very benevolent and all that. But yeah, that was the first Crypt Keeper that we saw on screen. And let's talk about his portrayal of him. He was portrayed in a very serious way. Ralph Richardson's a distinguished actor, and a lot of so the point is though, it was a much different take on the series than the HBO series, which we'll get to in a few moments. So Ralph Richardson played the part very serious, almost menacing, you know. It was a little different than the comics because in the comics, although the Crypt Keeper, when he first showed up in Crime Patrol 15, all the way to the early issues of Tales from the Crypt, he was somewhat of a menacing character. But then somewhere down the line, he started to become more comical. And I think that's what HBO touched up on. Because if you see the puppet in Tales from the Crypt, we know that one. That's the fame. A lot of people know Tales from the Crypt from that. He was always saying one-liners and puns. He was more of, more comic relief than anything else. But that is not what you got with Ralph Richardson's portrayal of the Crypt Keeper in Tales from the Crypt in 1971 by Amicus. He was dressed like a monk, because, the Crypt Keeper, Vault Keeper, they always had the hoods and, the robes on. So what they were going for, the Amicus was going for, was that he was some sort of monk in this, in the catacombs, and he was telling all these different people why they were there, what they could, what could happen to them, and that's where the stories later came out. But I thought he did a really good job. I would recommend you watch the first one. Now, some of the action and the effects are cheesy and all that stuff. You're not going to remove that from that movie. But I still think, though, Ralph Richardson's portrayal of the Crypt Keeper was a good one. And quite frankly, one I wish was replicated many, many years later. So I think he did really well. Now we're going to go to John Kassir's portrayal, which was voice only, of the Crypt Keeper in the HBO series. I think Kassir's portrayal of the Crypt Keeper will voice only. It's very distinguishable. I think it's well known. One of HBO's most popular series. I think that that's the Crypt Keeper that we're all familiar with. The puppet that's making jokes and all of that. I think Al Feldstein, one of the guys at EC that was responsible for Tales from the Crypt, drawing Tales from the Crypt, writing stories, along with Bill Gaines, the publisher of EC Comics that put out Tales from the Crypt. I think Al Feldstein, I don't remember Bill Gaines if he said anything, but I think it was Al Feldstein that really had a problem with that puppet. He did not like the Crypt Keeper portrayed that way, and I guess didn't really take it too seriously. But it is what it is. It's the more popular version of the Crypt Keeper. I don't think too many people remember the Ralph Richardson portrayal or even know that movie unless you're a diehard EC fan or just an EC fan in passing. Most people haven't heard of those movies and probably haven't watched them and probably wouldn't want to watch them. But they would probably want to sit through Tales from the Crypt on HBO more than they would the Amicus films. So he definitely had an impact. Um, I think John Kassir was okay. I mean, I don't really like the puns and all that stuff. That was one of my problems with the Crypt Keeper parts in in the books and on the show. Everything was like almost like a ghoulish joke, and it just didn't really resonate with me that much. But I do think that the puppet version of the Crypt Keeper was very iconic and was still not so bad. But I would like to see something else. If they ever reboot that in some way, whether it's on TV or on movies, I would like to see a scarier Crypt Keeper, one that's more close to the comics before he started becoming, cracking one-liners. So now we're going to move on to another character, Loki. Who makes his first appearance here in Journey into Mystery 85. Well, like with the previous video and what I was just talking about with Ralph Richardson and John Kassir, there have been multiple performances of a lot of characters. In Loki's case, he's only been portrayed by one actor, Tom Hiddleston. Who I think also went for the role of Thor. And I think there's some shots of him with his hair blonde trying out for that role, but he wound up getting Loki. And I think overall, I think he was born to play that role, or at least, I think he did a really, really excellent job with that character. For me, the Loki that appears here and in many of the issues which Loki appeared over many decades, I never liked the look of the character. I've always thought that the costume was kind of goofy, and it just never really meant anything, even though the character was important, obviously. Menacing, troublesome, mischievous. That's all the things that Loki is. He's the god of mischief. But I just didn't like his look. He had that little ponytail that's sticking out of a, headgear and all that. It just looked a little corny to me. Now here comes Tom Hiddleston. And one of the cases where the movies took the character and made him look better on screen than he was in the comic books. And I think very much like Blade, who will be in another episode, I think once the movies took that character and changed the appearance, that was something that was more suitable for the big screen, the character's look in the comics mirrored it afterwards. I think now Loki looks a lot like Tom Hiddleston does in the comics. I could be wrong. Correct me in the comics, but I remember seeing a couple issues a few years ago where Loki has his own series. It looks like Tom Hiddleston. It doesn't look like, this Loki, with the goofy horns and all that stuff. Even though they gave Tom Hiddleston the horns, it looks good on the character. But when drawn in this version, it to me just looked kind of weird. It just didn't really resonate too well with me. So I think Tom Hiddleston did a great job of portraying the character. You could tell he was having fun playing Loki. He did a great job. He was very believable and really made that character a likable character. You know, when people go see the movies and see Loki's in it, Tom Hiddleston, they're like, oh, this is cool, because he really uh, really did justice to that character, I feel. Last one I want to talk about. This one's an important one, and this one, you know, it's probably going to be showing up again very soon in the movies. We have none other than Doctor Doom, the Fantastic Four's main adversary. Okay, where do we start with this one? Well, I'll start with the comics. Doctor Doom is the best Marvel villain, period. He is the main villain of the Marvel Universe. Even though he is closely associated with the Fantastic Four, he has gone on to menace other Marvel heroes, obviously. He first started out as an antagonist for the Fantastic Four. His look, the way Kirby drew, I think he was inspired by the Grim Reaper when he drew Doctor Doom. With the mask and everything, the personality of Doctor Doom, everything. I'm not going to go over everything about Doctor Doom. Those of you that know, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you that don't really know, you could look it up and find out some stuff about him. But Doctor Doom is the villain of the Marvel Universe. That being said, what about his portrayal in the silver screen, the big screen? Not good. Not good at all. Doctor Doom, there was a Roger Corman low-budget Fantastic Four movie that came out in 1994. I think he was played by, I wrote it down here, an actor by the name of Joseph Culp, who I think went on to be, he was on Mad Men, the TV series, and a popular AMC TV series, Mad Men. I think he was the father of one of the main characters, whatever. How did he look in that movie? You ever see Flash Gordon? Did you remember that character, Clytus, in Flash Gordon? The guy with the golden mask and everything, he looked just like him. That might have been Clytus's mask. It's hard, you know. I don't really want to bash that movie too much because it was a low budget movie. It was never meant to be this big production, and for me to bash the acting or the way the character or characters were portrayed, Doctor Doom, for the purposes of this video, the way he was portrayed in that movie, you know, it's neither here nor there. It doesn't really matter. But that was the first time you saw Doctor Doom, I think, in movie form. I think he's been on animated shows and all that, cartoons, all that stuff, I think, since the 60s. So I can't really fault that version of him that much, okay? But now let's get into something more modern, starting with 2000 and when did this movie come out? 2005, Fantastic Four. It was under Fox Studios now. Now this was again before Marvel Studios bought out the rights last year. So Fox Studios was putting out their own X-Men movies and their Fantastic Four movies, and so they put out two, one in 2005 and one in 2007. Doctor Doom was in both of them. How did he look? The actor was Julian McMahon, who I think was on Nip Tuck or something like that, a TV series. Whatever. So I think the costume of Doctor Doom looked pretty good. I don't think it was that bad. I don't think anybody in that movie that played the characters, the Mr. Fantastic thing, I don't think that any of them were that bad. I think they were okay. It's just that perhaps the story wasn't that good or something like that. My problem with Doctor Doom in those movies, one was that they put him on the same ship that left the Earth, where they all got exposed to the rays that turned them into the Fantastic Four. In the comics, that wasn't the case with Doctor Doom, so I don't know why they had to do it in this movie. I don't know why they couldn't just keep Doctor Doom, you know, a separate from that and still be a threat. I don't get it. I also had a problem with some portions of that movie, and especially the second one, The Rise of the Silver Surfer with Doctor Doom. Most of the time, you saw him out without his gear, without the mask, without his, you know, you never see Doctor Doom without his stuff on. I mean, occasionally. But especially in the second one, for the majority of that film, he was just walking around like the way I am right now, in a suit or in some casual wear. I mean, that is not Doctor Doom. He's always in that metal mask. He's always in his gear. And there was only a few brief scenes of him in his gear in part two. He was in his gear more often, more so in the first movie, although you saw a lot of him without the gear. It just, to me, that took a lot of the magic of Doctor Doom away. Doctor Doom's always in that gear, and that's very much part of his character, okay? You know, you could take a look at Spider-Man and say, yes, of course, when Spider-Man's in his gear, that's essentially part of the character. But also part of that character is Peter Parker when he's out of his gear, when he's interacting with other people in his life, that he's trying to make sense of the things that are going on in his life and his struggles. So unmasked and masked is very much part of who Spider-Man is. With Doctor Doom, most of that character, you know, there's a lot of backstory to him, of course, but most of that character is the man with the mask on. You know, someone that's hiding from society for his own egotistical, narcissistic reasons. Okay? That is very much the part of the character of Doctor Doom. And for him to be walking around with no mask on as like this regular casual scientist, that's not good. When I was watching that movie, even though I could sit through those movies, but when I was watching the first one, I'm like, yeah, they're getting this wrong. I mean, I liked the way the mask looked when he had it on, but I didn't like the way he had his powers and the powers that he had. It just did not, it wasn't good. But we're not done. They did another reboot of this in 2015, 10 years after the Fox Studios. Fox did it again in 2015 with Fantastic Four. Horrible movie. Absolutely horrible. Again, they're trying to pool everybody together to create origin stories that really did not need to be. That just did not need to be that in that way. And I'm speaking mainly about Doctor Doom. Again, Doctor Doom is exposed to the same crap that the Fantastic Four is exposed to, and that's how he becomes Doctor Doom. That is, I mean, I think they were going more with the ultimate version of him. Well, if that's the ultimate version of him in the Ultimate Universe, that sucks. It just stinks. It just stinks. It's the movie. I have nothing. He was played by Tobey Kebbell, I think it is. I have nothing against the actor. I think he's a pretty decent actor. But again, I don't think he was right for that role. It was a poor match. And the way he looked when he eventually became Doctor Doom, that wasn't Doctor Doom. I mean, seriously, that just was not Doctor Doom. And I'd go with the Roger Corman version of Doctor Doom before I would go with that reboot in 2015. Well, you're going to see another Doctor Doom sometime soon in the movies when they reboot it again, this time under the MCU. I think it's going to be done right. It's going to be interesting to see how they do this. I'm hoping that they finally do the character justice, and it really works out. So that is my take on those three characters. That's my take on those three characters. Hope you enjoyed the video, and there'll be more coming out soon. Thanks, everybody.